Hello everybody, my name is Pal. Welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. Today I'm going to do a video about bread and about sourdough specifically. So if anybody's interested in kind of a little bit of the history of bread, you're going to run into sourdough pretty much instantly because up until the last maybe 150 years or so, all leavened breads were sourdoughs. So basically, people had been making sourdough breads for thousands of years. I think I have some notes here. The oldest sourdough bread that they've found from like excavation sites and whatever is about 3700 BC, and that was in Switzerland. But scientists suppose that people have been making sourdough breads for like thousands of years, even before that. So it's actually quite an ancient thing, and it's only been recently that people have started kind of using commercial baker's yeast to replace sourdough. And there's several good reasons why you want to at least eat some sourdough or maybe try making some for yourself. That's what I would encourage you to do. There's definitely some health benefits as well as taste benefits. I think sourdough breads taste really, really great, and many modern breads actually add bread improvers or other kind of like agents to basically either help with the rise of the flour, the bread, or to just make up some of the lacking taste and try to make things be more like the traditional bread, which you can just make yourself and not have to use a whole bunch of added stuff. There's also studies that show you have smaller surges in your blood sugar and glucose levels. Glucose and insulin levels in your blood after eating sourdough breads. It works to raise flours that are lower in gluten content, so like rye flours, spelt flours. You can use sourdough as a raising agent for those better than you can commercial yeast. And let's see, what else did I put down here? Yeah, basically, for some things, like if you want to make 100% rye flour bread, you pretty much can't do it with commercial yeast. You have to use like some kind of sourdough. Another thing that I just want to briefly address is that sourdough doesn't necessarily mean that the bread is sour. It can be sour, and some people actually like that taste, but it's really just a matter of personal preference and how long you let the sourdough basically act on the amount of flour that you've added to it. If you just kind of keep letting it raise and kneading it again and letting it rise again, if you just do that for enough cycles, pretty much the bread will become sour. Some people like that, and in fact, in like San Francisco, there's quite a bit of a culture of sourdough. I guess that was actually brought over to the U.S. To San Francisco by the French, and the tradition really kind of got a foothold there, and to this day, everybody knows. I think in the U.S. like sourdough is like a San Franciscan kind of bread, but in the rest of the world, it's basically just like a more traditional kind of artisan bread that a lot of people are familiar with. So, that's kind of where I wanted to start and just talk a little bit about the history of the sourdough. I actually started making sourdough breads about maybe 8 years ago now. And I first started just making, regular homemade bread with commercial yeast that I bought in the store. In the U.S., I think most of the yeast that you see is like the little packets. It almost looks like a tea bag kind of size package, and it's like a powdered kind of granular kind of yeast. You add some like lukewarm water or what have you, and then you add some flour and it starts bubbling up, and then you add a little more flour, and then you use that as your raising agent for like breads, pizzas, whatever. And here in Europe, they actually have like a live yeast. It's not a dried powder. It's in like a little square. Almost looks like a little, like what you would see like a little dollop of like butter or something like that. Like it comes in a little square. And much the same thing though. You add a little bit of warm water and some flour, and it'll start going. And that's how I started baking bread. I think that's a good way to start for anybody who wants to get their feet wet into bread baking. I'm not, if you watch any of my videos, you'll see I don't really like measuring things and being super precise. So that's actually something else that I want to just mention, that you don't really have to get all crazy and scientific when you're making bread. If you want to, that's great. Some people really like the precise recipes, and you can just, you know, like measure everything out and grams this and grams that, and you know how much water and weigh everything. I don't do that. I just go by feel, and it works fine. And I would just encourage anybody to try it. It's actually a lot less complex than it seems at first when you start reading about it. So what I hope to do in this video, I'm actually going to split this into at least one, maybe more part, maybe more than that, is I want to show you kind of how to make your own starter, because a lot of people just don't know how to get starter, or they don't know anyone who already has starter. If you do know somebody who has starter, they can just give you some. That's probably the easiest thing, but if you want to make your own, it's really easy, and there's not much that you have to know or do, and I'm going to show that to you guys in a little bit. So yeah, I think I hopefully covered kind of the why you would want to do it. Oh, I guess like one other reason is that you know, just you're gonna be able to make bread for yourself with fewer ingredients. You're gonna have to go to the store and buy yeast. You can just make it yourself at home with just flour and water and a little bit of time, and then you just always maintain a little bit, and you always put it back in the fridge. You know, as you're making your next batch, you just save some and put it back in the fridge, and that actually, you know, helps you cut back a little bit of cost, but over time that can add up too as well. Not like it's a huge amount of money to buy a little bit of yeast, but you get the point. And yeah, I think that's gonna be it. So yeah, let's go in the kitchen and I'll show you guys how to make the starter. Okay, so you're gonna need basically just these things right here to start your sourdough starter. Most important thing is you're gonna want to get some whole wheat, organic, preferably rye. Especially organic for this, because you want to make sure there's no like pesticides or anything on the you know, on the flour as a residue, or anything that's like a antifungal, antimicrobial kind of like, you know, chemical that they may have used as a preservative or anything like that. So just got my handy dandy you know, local organic whole wheat rye flour. You want to get a nice glass bowl or something like this with a lid, and you're going to take just about 2 heaping spoonfuls. So you don't need to go crazy, just dump that in there, and one more, and you're going to add a little bit of water. It's going to be a little bit tricky doing this with one hand, but anyway, again, like I said, I don't really go by any kind of measurements, just start mixing it up. And I go by consistency and feel. Probably gonna add a little bit more. Yeah, and just a tiny bit more here. If you ever add too much, you know, just add a little more flour. It doesn't really matter that much. And just mix this up into a little bit of a paste like this, and that's about good. You just want to even it all out. Maybe a tiny bit more runny, I think, is okay. Well, you don't want it to be runny. I shouldn't use that word. That's not the right word. But a little bit smoother might be preferable. Let's add a tiny bit more. Okay, so this is the consistency we're looking for right here. This is pretty nice. Just the reason why you use rye flour, I've read just on various forums and stuff on the net, and some books and stuff that I've looked into, that they basically just say like rye flour is one of the easiest ones to cultivate your starter from. Basically all flours will have like a natural mix of some bacteria and yeast that are in there, and they get activated when the water gets added. So as long as it stays dry, you know, they don't become active. But once you add the water and you just let this sit, they will become activated. And what you do is you basically just let this sit now out at like room temperature, and it really depends on how long it will take, because it depends on your temperature, your humidity, a whole bunch of kind of things that might be going on. I found that in the winter, because we're heating, sometimes it's actually easier to start a sourdough. If you're living in a place where it's like really warm, it might be too hot in the summer. It really depends on like your situation, but here's the first step. You just mix it up, you let it get to this consistency, you cover it, and then you just let it sit. And what you're going to look for is little bubbles that will appear in this, and those bubbles are actually caused by the bacteria and the yeast as they start eating the like the starch and the gluten in here, and they produce a carbon dioxide and ethanol byproduct. If you let this sit long enough and it'll ferment, it will actually produce a little bit of alcohol, which is interesting. But anyway, I'll get to that later. For now, this is all you need to do. Mix it up, let it sit, cover this back. Typically, what I found is that it will take about 24 hours for the bubbles to start appearing. I'm going to stop the video here, and then part 2 will pick up from that point. So if you want to see how this turns out, remember to subscribe, and yeah, I'll have the next part coming up for you probably tomorrow night. See you guys later. Bye.